Well, this month marks 50 years since the tragic sinking of the Great Lakes freighter Edmund Fitzgerald.
For nearly 50 years, the Great Lakes have guarded a secret. The final resting place of the Edmund Fitzgerald, the pride of the American side, a ship so massive, so trusted, that no one believed it could ever vanish. But on one freezing November night, it did, swallowed whole by Lake Superior.
It happened so quickly that there was little chance that anybody from the crew could have survived this disaster,
Leaving behind only silence and questions. Now, decades later, a new underwater drone has descended into the darkness, and what it captured has shaken everything we thought we knew. Because deep beneath the waves, the Fitzgerald isn't just a wreck, it's a warning. And what the drone found down there? No one was ready for it. The pride of the American side. When people talk about the Edmund Fitzgerald, there's this unshakable mix of pride and sadness in their voices. It's one of those stories that everyone around the Great Lakes seems to know a little bit about. A ship so respected that folks still call it the pride of the American side. And honestly, it earned that name. Back in the 1950s, America was in its building era. Everything was about being bigger, stronger, faster. And on the Great Lakes, that spirit came in the form of the Fitzgerald. When she was launched in 1958, it wasn't just another ship sliding into the water. It was an event. Thousands showed up just to watch her touch the lake for the first time. At 729 feet long and over 13,000 tons empty, she was a monster, the largest freighter ever built for the Great Lakes. But what really made the Fitzgerald special wasn't just her size, it was how she performed. This thing moved. She broke cargo records year after year, hauling iron ore from Minnesota to the steel mills of Detroit. People would line up along the shorelines just to see her pass. And if you ever talk to anyone who worked the lakes back then, they'll tell you, when the Fitz came through, you knew it. Her horn echoed across the water like a declaration. Here comes the big one. And for the crew, serving aboard her was a badge of honor. These weren't just workers punching in hours. They were sailors who took genuine pride in their ship. Some spent years aboard her, treating it like a second home. The captain, Ernest McSorley, was a veteran of the lakes, quiet, respected, experienced. He knew the waters inside out. To his men, he wasn't just their boss. He was the kind of guy you trusted with your life. Every sailor will tell you, the Great Lakes can turn on you in an instant. Calm one minute, chaos the next. But the Fitzgerald had handled storm after storm for 17 years without a serious incident. That built confidence, maybe even a little too much. By 1975, the Fitz had a spotless record. To everyone, she was practically invincible. What's fascinating is how much personality people gave that ship. You hear stories about sailors talking to her like she was alive. That's how deep the connection ran. When you're out there surrounded by nothing but cold water and wind, your ship becomes your world. You trust it with everything. But here's the thing about legends. They make you believe nothing can touch them. And that's exactly what made the Fitzgerald story so tragic. Because when you stand that tall, when the whole world calls you unsinkable, there's only one way the story can end. No one knew it yet, but that final voyage was already marked in history. The same pride that made her famous was about to meet the one force even the mighty Fitz couldn't outrun. The November storm waiting just beyond the horizon. The night everything went wrong. Every ship that sails the Great Lakes knows the risk, but knowing it doesn't make you ready when the lake decides to turn. On November 9, 1975, the Edmund Fitzgerald left Superior, Wisconsin, carrying over 26,000 tons of taconite pellets bound for Detroit. The weather that morning was cold but calm, nothing unusual for late fall. Captain Ernest McSorley and his 29-man crew had done this route dozens of times. It was supposed to be another routine trip across Lake Superior. Not far behind her was another freighter, the Arthur M. Anderson. Both ships were headed in the same direction and agreed to stay in contact throughout the journey. Radio updates between them were steady, mostly short exchanges about weather conditions and course corrections. The forecast had mentioned a storm forming over the plains, But November storms were part of life on the Great Lakes. Sailors expected them. By late evening, the first signs of trouble started to show. The wind shifted sharply, and the temperature dropped fast. Waves began building, small at first, then heavier as the hours went on. McSorley slowed the Fitzgerald slightly to handle the rising swells, but there was no panic. They had seen weather like this before. Through the night, the situation got worse. Winds climbed past 50 miles per hour, and the snow began to fall in thick sheets. Visibility dropped to near zero. The lake was now alive, waves crashing from all directions, water pounding the decks. Still, McSorley kept his composure. He stayed in constant touch with the Anderson, reporting that his ship had lost a fence rail and a couple of vent covers, but was otherwise holding steady. By the next afternoon, November 10th, the storm reached its peak. Wind gusts hit nearly 80 miles an hour, and waves rose higher than 30 feet. The Fitzgerald's radar had gone out completely, leaving McSorley dependent on the Anderson for updates. The two ships, though miles apart, relied on each other's eyes to navigate through the chaos. At around 3:30 p.m., McSorley's tone stayed calm, even as he admitted the ship was listing and taking some damage. He said the pumps were working, and there was no cause for alarm. The Anderson's crew later said his voice sounded steady, like a man who had everything under control. By nightfall, the lake was at its worst. Snow, wind, and freezing water made it impossible to see even a few hundred feet ahead. The Anderson continued calling out to the Fitzgerald, checking in every few minutes. Then, at 7:10 p.m., McSorley made his final transmission. When asked how they were doing, he simply said that we are holding our own. That was the last anyone ever heard from the Edmund Fitzgerald. Minutes later, the Anderson's radar showed an empty screen. The ship had vanished. No distress signal, no flare, no trace. Rescue planes and ships were launched immediately, but the weather made the search nearly impossible. All they found were pieces of debris, lifeboats torn apart, life rings scattered across the water. Not a single crew member was ever recovered. 30 men went out on the Fitzgerald that day. None came home, and as the storm faded, it left behind one question that still haunts the Great Lakes. How does a ship that strong, with a captain that experienced, simply disappear? What really sank the Fitzgerald? Once the authorities actually found the wreck, that's when things really started to get interesting. And finding the Edmund Fitzgerald did not clear up what went wrong. It only raised more questions. The Navy was the first to spot something. On November 14, 1975, just a few days after the ship went missing, they used a special aircraft called the P-3 Orion. It had this advanced magnetic detector that could sense large metal objects underwater, and it caught something huge sitting deep down in Lake Superior. The Coast Guard sent in side-scan sonar to map the area, and what they found wasn't what anyone expected. The Fitzgerald wasn't lying there as one whole ship was split into two massive pieces, sitting around 530 feet deep, one part upright, the other flipped over. That immediately told everyone that this thing didn't just sink slowly. Something violent happened. By the next year, 1976, the Navy sent an underwater robot, Curve 3, to go down and film it. And get this, it took over 43,000 feet of footage and nearly 900 color photos. That's a lot of tape for the 70s. The video showed the bow sitting straight in the mud, the stern upside down, and debris scattered everywhere between them. Some parts looked twisted or crushed, which pointed to extreme pressure. Some hatches were missing or pushed in. But here's the crazy part. No one could say exactly how it all happened. Was it a wave, a shoal, a design flaw? Everyone had their own theory. The Coast Guard eventually said it was likely flooding water getting into the cargo hold because of damaged hatch covers. The waves were so strong, they might have bent or collapsed part of the deck, letting water in until the ship just couldn't stay afloat. Makes sense, right? Except that some experts totally disagreed. Other divers and researchers claimed the ship might have hit something underwater, a hidden shoal that tore through the bottom. Or maybe one of those massive rogue waves slammed the deck so hard it just snapped midship. Even today, there's no single answer everyone agrees on. And one more thing that stuns people, is that there were no bodies recovered. None. Just lifeboat pieces, a few life jackets, some floating debris. That's it. It's honestly chilling. It's like the whole crew just vanished with the ship in one instant. Since then, there have been a few expeditions to the site, but the wreck is now protected by Canadian law. It's treated as a gravesite. No one is allowed to disturb it. Only remote submersibles and high-tech drones have gone down since, each time revealing a little more detail. And that's what keeps this story so alive. Every time technology improves, someone takes another look, hoping for new proof. But all those photos and scans still tell the same thing. A proud ship that broke apart under the weight of something massive, something no one saw coming. What's strange is that after all these years, even with all that tech, the Fitzgerald's final moments are still a mystery. The lake gave us evidence, but not the full story. The dive that changed everything. For decades, people thought they'd heard everything there was to know about the Edmund Fitzgerald. Then, out of nowhere, a new underwater mission changed that belief. Not a big-budget Hollywood dive, not some viral stunt, but an actual research team sent a drone down, and what it found started turning heads again. Most people would think that after nearly 50 years, the lake had given up all its secrets. But Lake Superior doesn't work that way. When the new underwater drone reached the wreck, the excitement wasn't about fancy equipment. It was about finally getting real, clear answers to questions that haunted families and sailors for half a century. The team didn't just want footage, they wanted evidence. What really happened down there? Was it the hatches, the storm, or something deeper? Something the original reports might have missed? When the drone descended, the crew on the surface was glued to their screens. That eerie mix of curiosity and dread could be felt in the air. Then, out of the darkness, the Fitzgerald came into view. The name still faintly visible, the steel bent, the deck half buried in silt. This wasn't just a wreck. It was a graveyard for 29 people who vanished without a single distress call. What caught everyone off guard wasn't the size of the ship or how broken it was. It was where the damage was. The drone spotted missing hatch clamps and bent metal like something had ripped them off. Then came the real shocker. A vent pipe completely sheared off, leaving a hole that went straight into the ship's heart. At that moment, things started clicking. For years, people debated what that meant. Now, it made sense. Those weren't just minor damages. They were critical points of failure. That hole might have been the reason the Fitz went under so fast, before anyone could react. From what's been seen so far, it's becoming clear that the crew never stood a chance. They were battling waves over 30 feet tall, losing radar, and taking on water faster than they could pump it out. And the sad part is that McSorley probably didn't even know how bad it was below deck. It was faith. Faith in a ship that had never failed him before. That's what makes this new footage so heavy. It doesn't just show rusted steel, it shows how quickly confidence can turn to tragedy. You see the ship's design flaws, the strain marks, the missing clamps, and you can almost feel how the Fitz fought until the very end. What's fascinating about this new exploration isn't the tech, it's the closure. People had spent years arguing over blame, the crew, the weather, the company. Now it felt like the pieces were finally falling into place. The Fitzgerald didn't sink because someone made one mistake. It was a chain reaction, small failures building into one unstoppable collapse. And that's where the new dive hit hardest. It didn't solve every mystery, but it showed enough to remind everyone that even legends can crack. Sometimes it's not one big disaster that kills a ship. It's the little things no one sees until it's far too late. The final truth. So after all this time, after all the theories, debates, and documentaries, what did the new evidence really prove? The Fitzgerald didn't go down because of one bad decision or one unlucky wave. The truth looks a lot more complicated, and honestly, a lot more dreadful. The new dive didn't just capture video, it confirmed a pattern. The missing clamps, the ripped vent, the way the front of the ship split from the rest, all of it points to something happening from within. The design itself, the weight of the cargo, and the pressure of the storm worked together like a slow trap. It could almost be called a perfect storm of flaws. What many overlook is that for decades, people blamed the crew. They said they didn't secure the hatches properly or ignored safety protocols. But looking at what the drone showed, that theory doesn't hold up anymore. Those men did everything right. It just wasn't enough. The ship was fighting physics, not negligence. And that's why this new footage hit such a nerve. It clears the crew's name. Captain McSorley wasn't careless. He was trapped in a situation that no training or courage could fix. That's not an excuse. That's reality. Even the toughest sailor can't beat steel fatigue and flooding that starts below the deck. The analysis teams later ran simulations, and the results were chilling. Once that vent tore off and the clamps failed, the flooding rate would have been insane, thousands of gallons a minute. The cargo, those iron ore pellets, would have soaked up water and grown heavier until the bow just couldn't rise again. In those final minutes, the Fitzgerald wasn't sailing anymore. It was sinking while still trying to stay afloat. Think about it. No mayday, no panic call, just silence. That means the crew never saw it coming. One moment they were holding their own, and the next, the lake just took them. It's terrifying how fast nature can end something so massive, so respected. And after all these years, people still leave tributes on the lakeshore every November 10th. They read the names of all 29 men. Some of their families are still alive, still waiting for closure. And maybe, just maybe, this new investigation gave them that. Not the full truth, but a truth that feels fair. That their fathers, brothers, and sons didn't fail. The ship did. It also makes you rethink that word unsinkable. We've heard it before. Titanic, Fitz, you name it. But nature doesn't care how strong your steel is or how confident your engineers are. Every ship has a limit, and when that limit's crossed, the water wins. Every time. After 5 decades, maybe we finally understand what happened. And more importantly, what didn't happen. There was no mystery monster wave, no hidden rock, no lazy crew. Just a chain of small mechanical failures that no one could see coming until it was too late. And maybe that's the final truth of the Fitzgerald. Not a ghost story, not a legend, but a reminder. Even the strongest things break. Even the biggest ships fall silent. And sometimes, the hardest part isn't finding out how it sank. It's accepting that it really did. Do you think the lake has finally given up all its secrets? Or is there still more waiting to be found? Let us know in the comments below. And if you want to stay updated as this story develops, make sure to hit like and subscribe to our channel. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.